Someone needs a haircut. This video was requested by one of our patrons who wanted to know the difference between ISFPs and INFPs. If you would like to request a video, you can do so on our Patreon or our website. Both of those links are in the description below. ISFP and INFP. What do these types have in common? Both are dominant introverted feeling users. Both of them have extroverted thinking as their inferior function. Both are IP types. And they both have similar kinds of vibes. As always seems to be the case, some of the confusion between these two types comes from the stereotypical online descriptions. Both of them are portrayed as artistic, sensitive, emotional, and all that stuff. But this misses big differences between the types. Like I've said before, my approach to the different personality typing systems is one of a magpie, where I take parts that I think work from each different system, then keep using them if they match up with my observations and my experience. One concept that I often bring up is the blind spot function, which you can find by taking the third function of a type and flipping whether it's introverted or extroverted. Think of the blind spot function as a type's worst function, the one they have the most difficulty with, even worse than the inferior function. INFPs have extroverted sensing as their blind spot function. ISFPs have extroverted intuition as their blind spot function. So think of those two functions as the worst function of each type. This is a very good place to start in telling the difference between the two types. I'm going to read out the traits you'd expect to see from each type, and then you can figure out which ones you resonate with the most. ISFPs have any as their blind spot function. This can mean they're sometimes unaware of the intentions of other people and have very little time for understanding the more slippery, disingenuous characters of the world. They can have difficulty with ambiguity, uncertainty, doubts, and shades of grey. They tend to be black and white in their emotional conclusions. They have a low tolerance for overly abstract and tangential descriptions and explanations. They're skeptical of highly novel and innovative approaches and favour more grounded and straightforward methods. NE blind spot in a nutshell is skepticism towards theorising and speculating. They prefer the concrete whenever possible. INFPs, on the other hand, have extroverted sensing as their blind spot function. This can make them detached from the real, tangible and concrete world. They can be in their heads and imaginations a lot, and as a result oblivious to their environment in some ways. They can be slow to take action and react to things. They dislike being imposed upon and pushed around by the external environment. That includes disliking when people are pushy and aggressive with them. They are people who move at their own pace. SE blind spot in a nutshell will come across as being physically detached. ISFPs are going to come across as more grounded than INFPs. One useful question to ask yourself if you're wondering between these two types is, could I ever be mistaken for or appear like an ESFP or an ENFP? ISFPs are often portrayed as meek and mild, whereas in reality they can be very fiery and even forceful. Just like the other high SE users, they have this kind of presence to them, this potential energy, and the sense that they could spring into action at any point. Contrary to being only the sensitive artist kind of type, they can be extremely passionate, driven, energetic, and very physical. They're never going to seem detached from their bodies or stuck in their heads that much. They're going to be and seem grounded and down to earth. Having SE in the second slot means they can use it as a tool. And of course, yes, that can be used for art or aesthetics, but also simply for sport. Someone who is used to being around these two types could probably tell just from the vibe they give off which one was which. Now, that's not a good way to type people because it's even more difficult than usual to verify, but I'd wager they'd be accurate lots of the time. So ISFPs can seem very similar to ESFPs sometimes. Equally, INFPs can come across like ENFPs. They can be zany, eccentric, and make use of that sometimes absurd and surreal NE humour. INFPs are going to come across as more ponderous in their heads, a little bit otherworldly in their vibe. They're rarely going to have an imposing presence or be forceful or pushy, whereas ISFPs definitely do have that side to them. ISFPs can be excellent at being intuitive and abstract when they want to be, but it's going to be in a specific way. They're going to want to narrow down on a conclusion to something, as opposed to INFPs who can be much more expansive and tangential, both in their thinking and communicating. ISFPs are often known as being quite to the point in the way they talk and communicate, whereas INFPs can definitely go on rants if they want to. Although they are introverts, because INFPs have that extroverted intuition in their second slot, it's quite easy for them to brainstorm and jump from one conversational point to another pretty easily. As they're going along, more and more possibilities will present themselves. So once you get them talking, put the kettle on and prepare to listen. It's a bit more difficult to get ISFPs to talk at length about anything. If you ask them a question, they'll give you an answer. Simple. I would say that ISFPs in general are going to come across as more present in a situation and as a result less awkward. A lot of the reason that certain types intuitive types come across as socially awkward is not necessarily because they can't deal with people well or don't want to. It's just because their brain is in many different places as well as the present moment. So an INFP is going to be drifting off into fantasy land, coming back into the conversation, being aware of their surroundings, then totally forgetting them and being oblivious and constantly floating around in this way. Whereas ISFPs are going to be much more in the here and now, in the present moment. They're not going to be staring off into space or fail to hear what someone has said because they were daydreaming. So if you have two people you know that might be either of these types, sit them down in a social setting and just keep an eye on who is there and who is sometimes there. I don't think we have many ISFPs on our Discord server, so feel free to find the link below and join. Also, if you'd like to request a video, the links to our website and Patreon are down below. If you are going to request a video, make it one that is within reason. Don't ask me to do an ultra marathon. That would just be way too easy.